Spectrovision Radio.
And the bus driver was kind of looking out, and Steve was looking out, and there was what appeared to be clearly visible to them a fur-covered foot sticking out of the ditch, as though something had been hit and was lying in the ditch with their appendage visible up over the edge of it. They could see like the hair on it looked kind of wispy and reddish brown. So, Steve went back. All he found was that it appeared that all of the debris on the road, like the normal nitty-gritty road stuff, was gone. It was like somebody had power washed that stretch of the road so that there was nothing left on it.
With infinite complacence, people went to and fro over the earth about their little affairs, serene in the assurance of their dominion over this small, spinning fragment of solar driftwood, which by chance or design man has inherited out of the dark mystery of time and space.
On this episode of Into the Fray, I welcome Michelle Suliere, and she is in the beautiful state of Maine. She owns the Green Hand Bookshop. You can visit that lovely bookshop at greenhandbookshop.com. And she is also an author and researcher. Her books are Strange Maine, Bigfoot in Maine, and she also has a chapter in David Weatherly's Wood Knocks, and that is volume 5. Michelle, welcome on.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me. It's nice to finally meet you in person.
You too. So I'm so excited for this chat. I just kind of reached out cold, as it were, I guess you could describe, and you're probably like, oh, who is this person? Another interview? I'm sure you get asked a lot for interviews. So
I know your name, so yeah.
Okay, you're like, it's not good, but I came on.
No,
I'm just kidding.
No, I've been watching what you've been doing for many years now. So,
thanks. Well, thank you for doing this.
It's nice to have peers that are, working alongside and doing their own routes and travels, and it's good to see what everybody's doing. So
absolutely, that's why I knew I had to reach out to you. Right up my alley. Of course, you have the separate Bigfoot book, and then you have a little bit of Bigfoot in Strange Maine as well. So right out of the gate, now you're sitting in a beautiful, behind you. I commented before we officially started, your background I love even more than mine, and it's just filled with these beautiful books. I would imagine, at least for me, even the bookshops alone are a dying breed. So to own a bookshop, it just makes me happy being around books. So how did that come to be? And what is the name Green Hand Bookshop all about? I want to know the inception of that name.
Sure. The bookshop came about because, I had been a lifelong reader. Like when I was a kid, I would constantly get in trouble for reading when I shouldn't be. And then I continued my interest in that, learned a little bit about book scouting, which is like picking up books to sell to booksellers so that then you have more money to buy your own books, essentially. And then worked at the local library and really enjoyed that. And got to a point where the economy was going sideways and all the jobs that I had been working had kind of dried up because of budgetary stuff. And I tend to, when things like that happen, I tend to strike out on my own path. And I thought, well, I've always wondered if I could, kind of create and run a bookstore. So I guess we're at a stopping point now. So I guess we can try it out. And that was 16 and a half years ago. So it's not getting rich on it by any stretch of the imagination, but my whole goal was just to make a living. So that seems to mostly be working. This past year has been a struggle, but yeah, it's great. And every time I think I'm sick of it, I go back and find myself, of course, talking to the books as though, like, oh, hey, hi.
I would do the same
So,
thing.
yeah, so it's just, it's kind of like an additional, like a paper and ink family, um, inhabiting their own space there. So it's, yeah, so that's how I wound up doing that. And now I'm forgetting the other part of the question, if there
Just kind
was
of
one.
where, if there's any backstory to the name itself.
Oh, right. Yes. Yeah. I mean, the simple answer is that it just came out of one of my old sketchbooks. Because when I was getting ready to open the shop, I was like, I have 10 million sketchbooks with all sorts of stuff written and drawn in them. There has to be something in here that will kind of spark something. And then I ran across, I draw a lot of hands. Green is my favorite color. And so between the two of those things, the green hand came about. And so I drew the logo, which is, I started by tracing my own hand. So that's my hand, or a version of it. And yeah, but since opening, I, you know, over a decade ago, I've encountered all sorts of interesting literary references and pop cultural references, lots of old movie posters, old book covers with like a creepy hand reaching out that happens to be green, stories about green hands. There's a green hand family amongst the hobbits in Tolkien's, in his Silmarillion. And I think even George R. R. Martin has an Order of the Green Hand, like a knighthood, one of the Order of Knights. So it's like, oh, so the green hand is here and there and everywhere. And it just, for me, the symbolism has kind of come to mean, like a green thumb, but going in many more different directions, so growth and curiosity and a little bit of mystery. And yeah, so that's the green hand.
So to this day, do you still get requests from people that want, like, say, like me, I read copious amounts of Stephen King, and some people will post in these certain groups about they have a first edition, or is this actually his, even not an autograph, let's just go with a rare first edition or something. Do you have people coming to you that want you to find certain books for them?
Yeah, I do. I have a certain amount of people who do that, and I tend to work well with people who kind of make a personal connection. But I also, Stephen King in particular is such a busy kind of nexus for pop culture that there are a lot of people who, are casting the net wide trying to look for his stuff. So, I tend to start with like the local folks and kind of work out from there, because being a bricks and mortar shop, I like to start with, my square mile and then work out from there. So, but yeah, I definitely have people who have me, on the prowl for certain titles or editions. And yeah, I actually almost wore a Stephen King t-shirt today. So it's very funny that you mentioned that.
Well, I wore my silver bullet shirt for you today, so because we will be talking about those creatures. I mean, and I didn't even bring up Stephen King just because you happen to be in Maine, of course, because so much of his works are set in Maine, of course, Derry, Castle Rock, and they're all interwoven in all of his books. Yeah. But I wonder how many more people you get. You're like, of course you want to first edition Stephen King, whatever it is. And we are in Maine after all, So yeah, that's very cool.
It's he's a continuous presence. Yeah, shall we say?
I'll bet he is. He is an incredible writer. So how did you get into just strange subjects in general?
I mean, when I was a kid, when I went to the library, I would there was a point in time when I started digging into the odd stuff. Like, the library sold off a bunch of old copies of Omni magazine, and one of them happened to be the UFO issue from like the late 70s, and that just sort of like blew my mind. And so I started, I found what the call number is in the library for the Dewey Decimal System for the strange and unexplained topics, and I would just go through everything in that section and devour it, which was super fun. But I never, it's funny, like the UFOs and the ghosts made more sense to me at that age. Um, the creatures I was, I thought were cool, but I don't think at that age I thought, oh, maybe I will, this will turn into a thing for me. It wasn't something that captivated me that much. Definitely the ghosts and UFOs piqued my interest more at that age, which is kind of funny. Um, and then, life goes on. I stayed interested in weird things, read a lot of Lovecraft and horror fiction, finally got into horror films in my 30s because of my husband, who was a friend and then a boyfriend at the time, and worked at Videoport, which was awesome. And then around that same time, I wound up with a copy of Lauren Coleman's Mysterious America and devoured that. And that kind of, I feel like that really drew me back into that world in a way that let me really settle into it because, he had done the US kind of as a whole, but all the stories for the most part were small locations, little places, local folklore. And I really love that stuff. My mom did amateur Maine historic research herself for her master's degree here in Maine. And so I had already been interested in the Maine side of things. And I was looking around online. It was, kind of early days for the internet, and ran across this great website called the New England Anomaly, which was a New England wide one. She was located down in Connecticut. And I was like, there's got to be something for Maine on here. Maine is a very peculiar place, really unique. And I kept looking and there really wasn't anything. So I was like, oh no, I guess I have to do this. and so
You're like,
and so
twist my arm.
Yeah. And it's like, for years I've been reading about this stuff, but it's the drive I found that I really wanted to do was to take the little bits of information I was finding and put them together and try to, figure things out. Not figure them out and like nail them down, because I feel like you lose a lot when you nail things down too tightly. I think that's a drawback of a lot of the academic end of this stuff. But, the folkloric stuff, the oral history, all the things that kind of fall through the cracks and get lost to time because they're not officially recorded. That's the real heart of everyday life and everyday history, and it's neglected. So again, I was like, oh no, I guess I'll have to focus on that. So that's really what happened. And then I just started doing it because that's what I do, is I think of something and then I do it. And then, did the blog. The blog turned into a little broadsheet zine kind of thing, the Strange Maine Gazette. And then I got approached by History Press about doing a book. And then I did the book, and then the book turned into another book. And I have like probably a half dozen other books I really want to do that are kind of percolating meanwhile. But yeah, so it's turned into a lifetime pursuit. And I don't think I'll ever run out of interesting stuff to look at because it's just endless. And that's just like, and that's with me focusing on Maine for the most part. Like, I feel like every location in the US, every neighborhood, every town or hamlet, everybody has their own stories that are there, just sort of quietly slipping between the cracks until somebody is like, hey, what's that?
Do you find that people that have read the books then come into the bookshop knowing about you and that they have read and interacted with your works, and then they want to share their own personal encounters?
Sometimes, yeah. That's always really, and it's really a wonderful kind of side effect of it. And sometimes people come in and they don't realize who I am, which is also really fun, kind of, because then you can kind of surprise them. But yeah, I've had some really interesting conversations with people who have read one or the other of my books, who either want to tell their story to me, or are willing to tell their story to me, or they're looking for somebody who's local to them. Like I've talked to people from Massachusetts and stuff like that, and even places like I think Utah, who are looking for people who know their area that do a similar kind of pursuit. And I think I've been pretty successful in getting folks to the people they need to talk to, just by kind of networking and reaching out to other researchers in their area. So that part has been a really good experience so far. Yeah.
Well, it's probably
nice side effect.
pretty cool to anybody coming in looking for the weird stuff like we like. You send them to the section and you're like, by the way, these may be my books, right? And these are great compilation books. All right, so let's dive in to some of the encounters and experiences. And I picked several, and then feel free to add any that you want. But we're going to start with the book Strange Maine. And the first one that I chose is titled Well Guarded Libby Mausoleum.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, that is, I was just rereading that chapter, and it's appropriate that it's winter that we're talking about this now, because that's when I visited the site.
Yeah, and that should be noted that anybody that grabs these books, because you are there, you've talked to however many people are still around to talk to you. You really did as much research on each of these encounters and experiences or locations that you could, including tying in the historical and going to the locations to get photos when you could. So just wanted to mention that for folks.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. And the Libby Mausoleum is, of course, there's a lot of stories in Strange Maine where I still want to know more. And the Libby Mausoleum is obviously one of those, because the historic back end of it is not filled into my satisfaction yet. But, and also the land of that cemetery too, because I feel like that I don't think it's just the mausoleum. Just kind of instinctually, it feels like it's a combination of things going on there. But certainly the Libby Mausoleum feels like kind of a focus point for that. It's set off from the cemetery proper. It's the most dominating feature besides the cold storage dead house at the front of the cemetery. And it's so it attracts attention regardless. But at the same time, it's turned away from the cemetery. So most mausoleums that I've encountered anyways, the entrance is, as you approach through the cemetery, there's the entrance to the mausoleum. It is, pretty obvious. But the Libby Mausoleum is turned around, so it has its back to the cemetery, and it's looking out over the river. So it feels like it's, thinking about other things.
It's like in denial. It's there. It's like, I'm not really here. I'm going to look out over this area here instead of the other gravestones and things like that. Yeah. Is there some kind of a past or after death rather superstition with something like that? Have you ever come across why the mausoleum is turned that way, or is it literally just maybe that view is prettier after death?
The initial takeaway would definitely be that it's view-based, because it really is. Like, the river is right there. It's a stunning view. And when you have enough money to build a mausoleum like that, you're probably also used to being able to choose your pieces of property based on what it gives you back.
Yeah.
in situ. But I have not, what you have asked about is something that remains on my list of things that I need to dig further into, because it can't be the only one like that. There must be others that kind of break the mold and do take that approach, for whatever reason. So yeah, that's one of the many question marks remaining around that site for me.
Yeah, like the very famous cemetery in New Orleans. I wonder, because a lot of prominent and wealthy people were interred there, and not, well, actually not quite so interred because of the ground and all the water there. But maybe
Right.
they were also, maybe some of those are also turned away. I haven't come across anything like that, but that's really interesting that you bring that up. It makes you wonder about superstitions or reasons for doing
Yeah.
such things, or maybe it's just the view.
Yeah, and a strong personality, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, you're like, no, I'm gonna build this and it's gonna face that way. So yeah.
Because I wanted to. Yeah.
Yeah. We're like, okay, you signed the check, so sure.
Yeah. So my friend Matt, who, described his encounter there, um, which was timing wise and hazard wise, was very interesting. Um, so, in the story, he and a couple of friends are going through the cemetery, and you know, they're all young punk rockers, but they also understand they're not punk in the sense that they're trashing everything around them. Like, he's going through as somebody who lives in the neighborhood and sees, picks up the empty 12 pack or whatever that somebody had left the night before, throws it away carefully, gets annoyed when somebody lets their dog poop in front of a grave. So he feels a sense of ownership in the location. Because that's where he's rooted, is in that neighborhood of Lewiston. Um, and then they approach it and things just feel off, very heavy. And one of his friends wants to try to kind of suss out what's going on with that. And things just feel really weird. And then I think it's when his friend lights a cigarette, that things kind of seem to go suddenly sideways, and he feels like he needs to move away from it. The large branch falls right where they were. A bunch of stuff happens at once, and then of course they all just go away. Preservation instinct kicks in. But I couldn't help wondering if one of the things was the fact that she had lit a cigarette, which, if it is like a protective territorial reaction to um, you know, juveniles in the vicinity of these sacred sites, um, if it was a protective kind of push away that, oh, now you've done it, you need to leave. You are not showing us the proper respect, even though you're kind of trying to, you're not really, not to our satisfaction. So, yeah, so that was like one of those little key elements in that story that I always kind of wondered about, because the timing is very interesting. And I had another friend who I had found that she had taken photos of the mausoleum as well. And that was one of the few other documentations of it I had found online. And on that adventure, as she was walking up, it's like set up on a little slope. And as she was walking up that, she like pulled something very badly in her leg, right as she was taking the photo. So it was just I was like, and so when I went, of course, we were like we were paying attention, but it was a very different environment. I think my friend, she had gone, I think it was during the warmer months, so maybe late summer. And then Matt had been there in mid-fall, like right in October. And we were there in, I think, January. So it had a much sparser feel, a much emptier feel. It was very cold. The wind was coming off the river. And I don't know, it just felt forbidding enough, just naturally. And we were being, careful and, trying to tread lightly. And we didn't encounter anything that was particularly odd. But we just kind of went and absorbed, and tried to get a sense of what the place was like. And it definitely left an impression, because that was, like a half hour or something on a cold winter day. And I can still just click right into that in my mind. And I'm there again with the wind and the blue sky and the white snow and the gray stones. And yeah, so and I like places like that in Maine. There's a lot of them. But people sometimes get frustrated with me because I don't always focus on like, spooking it up and making a ghost story out of stuff as much. But I feel like there are places that just emanate a sense of something. You don't need a ghost. You don't need a poltergeist. You don't need disembodied voices. Just something about that location just is aware and active and present and surrounds you. So if you can go and kind of inhabit that space and try to just absorb it, I think you can learn a lot. And I think people overlook that sometimes, looking for the thrill.
And as we know, some people are just more sensitive to those kinds of things, or they act like a flame, and then the moths are around and they go, ooh, I can see you and you might be able to interact with me. I also wonder, Michelle, if, like the lovely person who allowed their dog to take poop there, were they meaning to leave it, or were they scared away before they could pick it up, or was it just left there, as so often people do, which is very rude?
That was just somebody from the neighborhood walking their dog through the cemetery. So that was like a totally unrelated person to their friend group,
right?
And they did not see them do anything to address the situation. So they were just leaving fertilizer.
That's a bummer.
Yeah, it is.
That's when the what I've just termed moths, I guess, for this particular chapter. The moths should have come out and chased them away, so they would stay the heck out of the cemetery. It's so disrespectful.
Yeah, and I try, and as if you've read the other parts of the book Strange Maine, I also talk about that here in Portland with the Western Cemetery, which has a long history of dealing with vandalism and neglect. And, there are little waves of people trying to take care of it and, work with it again and caretake it, which is good. But it's a constant battle. So
people are bummers. And that's putting it pretty nicely. They are bummers. All right. Well, next up, we are going to be talking about the mystery beast of Turner.
Yes. That fellow. That is, it's still, that's one, again, I kind of consider that one an open case. I know that they found a carcass. Reporter Mark Laflamme was involved in that, and so was Lauren Coleman. And I can't remember which of them still has the paw. But somebody has that in their fridge or freezer, or I think it might be in Lauren's museum. I can't remember for sure. But he, it was, decades of stories about something dog-like but more grotesque that people would encounter in the woods or would hear in the woods. And those went just like kind of seemed, Mark said that those seemed to go like in a cycle of a few years at a time. So it wasn't a constant. Just every few years, every several years, there'd be another little flap of activity that people would notice and talk to him about. And I can't remember. I think I've talked to him since then to see if it has continued. I'm going to guess it has. Although I think maybe it got thrown off a little by everybody saying, "Oh, we found the mystery beast of Turner," and but I think that's just kind of like one iteration of it. I think that whatever it wasn't just that dog that they found. There's other stuff out there. There are other locations in Maine, in southern Maine, that have similar stuff going on that is probably more of a felid, like a cat type in nature. Like especially I think in the Wiscasset area, there was some stuff going on where there was sheep herds getting killed and stuff like that by something. And then other places where people are just seeing or hearing very weird things in the woods. I've heard stories about a giant, basically like a giant oversized wolf pacing somebody in their car on a winter road, I think near Grey New Gloucester, that area, probably about 15 years ago or so. So there's, I feel like the mystery beast of Turner is one kind of nexus point for that type of beast story, but it kind of it's echoed throughout the state like so many other things are, and it in some ways I find it must be immortal. I'm not saying like an immortal beast, but I'm saying like whatever is happening there is not, it's a continuum.
Yeah.
It's not just going to go away because they found what, some people thought was the body of the mystery beast of Turner.
Now, since we are covering the Loup-Garou next, was the Turner beast ever reported to walk on two legs? Anything like that?
That's a very good question. I'm trying to remember from what Mark said to me. I've got my little, see if paper and ink, it's all paper and ink. Yeah, I think most of the people he talked to seem to be actually sticking to like the four-legged, like on all fours dog related figure. They weren't saying like, I know there's other reports in Maine of dogmen,
yeah,
or wolfmen, but this is more like an actual creature, where some people even said, it was kind of like a hyena, but not really like a hyena. That's not exactly right. So it is definitely the four-legged dog type.
And what size were they usually saying it was?
I think fairly dog like the size of a good sized dog. But it always seems to have more hideously pronounced features, is the way Mark put it. So like, the eyes would reflect light or glow. It intimidates people, like people reported feeling menaced. Like there was a certain evil or malign element to it. Like it wasn't just a wild creature going about its business. It was something that was taking a stance and, trying to encroach upon them, or scare them away. And the other interesting thing that Mark told me was that, he talked to a lot of people about their encounters over the years, and they all mentioned specific traits, but none of them phrased it the same way. Like they were all using their own unique way to describe something, but it all amounted to the same general description. So that was what really stuck out to him, as something very interesting. Is they're not just like repeating from an online article they read somewhere or the same story that everybody else in the neighborhood has heard. They're trying to, tell you what they saw in their own words, but it matches the efforts of other people to tell their own experiences. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, like whatever they've seen growing up. Like I'm a huge movie buff, and I mean half of my tank tops have to do with movies that I love and things like that. So I'm always referencing movies, which I know drives people probably crazy, especially if they haven't seen it. They're like, that doesn't help me. But if that's what pops to your mind, if you're giving a report, I would imagine that's and like you said, they might be little differences, but at the end of the day, it's really the same thing. So that's cool.
Yeah, there's a common so expressed uniquely, but with definite commonalities between the descriptions. So yeah.
Yeah, a big hyena-like dog with, especially the eyes are lit from within. I think by the time you get to eyes lit from within, you're going, well, that's not going to be a fun thing to see. Usually those are tied to negative things and feisty things. So, yeah.
Yes.
Not very good. All right, Michelle, well, let's talk about the Loup-Garou.
Yes, let's. That is out of a lot of the stories in Strange Maine. That is one that I have continued to kind of try to chip away at over the years. There are language barrier issues because it's coming out of French and Quebec folklore. So a lot of the searching and stuff I do is text based, and so it gets tricky trying to track that stuff down in publications that are in other languages. But I keep trying. So, but the Loup-Garou is essentially the werewolf or wolfman of Maine, Maine and Quebec, Canada, and it's a very old rooted folklore that, from what I can tell and from what the folklorists can tell, came over to Quebec from France originally. So there are, and of course, you know the story of the Beast of Gévaudan. So there is a deep-rooted, monstrous wolfman creature that traveled with the settlers when they came to the New World. And then the stories have apparently continued echoing into the current population. People from Quebec came down into Maine to start working when different shifts in the economy and job availability and industry and stuff like that started happening in the 1900s. So there was a lot of migration of the people taking their stories with them. So, but as recently as just a few years ago, I was talking to one of my friends who was told stories from her mom's side of the family. And this actually ties to the Turner area too, because a bunch of them wound up in Turner. And so they had moved there originally from the Rumford area, which is a location that will come up a lot in my next Bigfoot in Maine book, because there's a lot of stuff going on there. But they didn't, her grandmother's generation didn't speak French commonly, but they were of Franco-Canadian descent. And the woods in that area, as you gathered from the mystery beast of Turner and everything else, have a strange feel to them. So my friend thinks that it was the stories they brought with them combined with the new location and its evocative, creepy nature that continued and flourished all those tales. So when she was a kid, she and her younger relatives were told to behave by her grandmother and aunties, or they would be eaten by the Loup-Garou, by the werewolf. And occasionally my friend's mom would actually have to step in and kind of like slow the grandmother down if things were getting too scary, too dark.
Yeah.
But basically the idea was a morally driven werewolf who would snack on children if they misbehaved, because one of the things that could attract the Loup-Garou is if you were making bad life decisions as a child and you were not following the proper moral compass, that sort of just would like summon the Loup-Garou and make you way more at risk. So So that was one element, was the moral element.
Yeah.
So a cautionary tale kind of thing. But it was always spoken of as a singular creature.
Mm.
So the Loup-Garou. And they were told never to walk close to the woods or alone late at night, which, of course, right, common
Yeah.
sense. But, kids do their own thing anyways. And pretty much everybody that talked to the kids about the Loup-Garou always had like second or third hand accounts that they could come up with to illustrate the creature. So someone who had been chased late at night, strange sightings in the woods. Even her dad said that he had seen a large animal stalking through the ground growth one summer, smaller than a bear, but much, much larger than an average dog. And he described it as a strange shade of dark reddish brown.
Mm.
It was moving away from him, and he, of course, chose to go in the opposite direction. But it stood out to him enough that he told it to my friend as like an event. So it was
Wow.
something to be remembered. So, so even in current generations, there are echoes of the Loup-Garou story. I know Lewiston, I think the Lewiston Auburn area has a heavy Franco-American heritage as well, and also has stories like that kids heard there. I asked my dad, because he grew up in Biddeford, also very Franco-American community. I mean, he had to repeat fourth grade because he couldn't speak English. So that gives you an idea of how embedded in the French culture they were there. And he doesn't remember anybody telling stories about that in Biddeford. So, but Biddeford, the town itself was a mill town, across the river from Saco. So pretty well settled, not a lot of woods directly adjacent to the town until you got, further out. So who knows, maybe the wooded setting is really like a required element for those stories to flourish. So it just, more questions.
So in that area, is it then believed to be this, as you say, they say there's one Loup-Garou, and if you're bad, it's gonna so essentially it's just this completely supernatural entity from wherever, fifth dimension or something, that manifests right into this one thing to take care of business. So it's not the classic, like my tank top entails, like a man that has, taken some dark oath and can turn into a werewolf, or he's some kind of a magician or wizard in some way.
Yeah, so I would say that the modern, or the recent interpretations of it tend towards that.
Yeah.
Like a more supernatural kind of creature. But as I'm sure you read in the chapter in Strange Maine, the Quebec history was tied very tightly to meddling in the occult, being cursed, or being cursed by your own behavior. So it tied it more to man as opposed to beast. It was definitely a different situation, and there were multiple of them. In the older stories, you could encounter one anywhere. So yeah. So I would love to, given the time, I would love to sort of dig into local Turner culture and find out, how tightly the mystery beast of Turner ties to their iteration of the Loup-Garou.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I love encounter stories, and I've taken a couple, not a lot, but a couple on my own show, where there's kind of the town old guy, or the town, oh, that's the crazy guy, we stay away from him. And then the whatever the beast is, and it could even be a big owl or something, or it could be a dog-like creature, and it's terrorizing the town. And finally a dad he's had enough, and he goes out with the shotgun and he shoots the creature. And then the next day, the old crazy guy happens to have a bullet right where he shot the creature the night before. So I just love encounters like that. And who knows? I mean, who knows? But I can't wait to see what you dig up for that there, Michelle. That is incredible. I was happy to go there. Okay, so before we get off, just strange Maine in general, and this is a real huge, just quick side tangent, a little side tangent rather. I just talked to Greg Roberts out of Oregon, and I brought up the North Pond Hermit in regards to, he had been in the woods for 27 years all by himself. He didn't even have campfires because he didn't want to be around people. He didn't want to be detected. And I'm always going, man, I wonder if Christopher ever saw anything strange out there, being out there for so very long, and in the freezing cold, quiet woods of Maine, when he could stay away from, of course, burglarizing houses and terrorizing the place for as long as he did. But I always wondered about that, if he ever saw anything out there.
Yeah, that's a really good question.
Yeah, it's just a little side tangent. It's not even really a question. No one's gonna know unless he spoke. But yeah. What an interesting fellow.
The reporter that wrote the book and worked with him on the book might have some little appendix material lying around about that. I'd be curious.
I mean, I still think that seeing a Bigfoot is like striking gold. I mean, you might be more apt to get struck by lightning than to see a Bigfoot. But speaking of that creature, we are now going to go into the book Bigfoot in Maine. And I do want to say that you did cover some historical accounts that have already been covered or people that have passed. But when you had the chance, as I said, you went and talked to them one-on-one to have them just flesh out their story more and to corroborate, of course. So I wanted to mention that. Okay, so the first person that I chose for you to kind of cover a little bit was Miss Lynn Collette.
Yes. Yeah. Lynn's encounter was really interesting. I think I did a illustration for her story. She was living at a house as a teenager, a family friend's house in Berwick, Maine, and taking care of the kids that lived there, a couple of boys. And then one night, another group of family friends came over, and the adults kind of broke off and were playing cards, and the kids were running around at the outdoors, of course, playing hide and seek, which is pretty standard for anybody who grew up in that era. And so she was keeping an eye on them, but they're running around. So, and it's known territory. So she's not it's not like the helicopter parenting kind of stuff that goes on today. Very different environment. And as she was kind of just being present and keeping an eye and an ear on things, one of the kids came up and approached her and told her that he had seen something. And so they went and looked, and then she saw it too. And I can't even imagine as a babysitter, with all the fraught tension of being in charge of other people's kids, those moments where you realize I have to make the right choices right in this moment, right now. There's no other option, So, but she managed to, after the initial, I can't even imagine the brain fry too, from just seeing what she saw. She yelled to the kids, just like, all right, it's time to go inside now. And everybody, of course, thunders in up the back porch steps, while she's kind of keeping an eye on this creature, which is just inside the wood line. And, got all the kids inside. The parents are like, why is everybody in so early? But it was the mosquitoes. There were too many mosquitoes. So, she had a good excuse, because it's Maine and that is a thing. But she spent the whole rest of the night, very spooked. I think she heard some stuff out in the backyard and, definitely tried looking, but it's very pitch dark out there. There's not a lot of light pollution, especially in that era in the 70s. Um, and so she didn't really see anything, wasn't able to find any tracks the next day or anything like that. But she essentially, these kids are playing hide and seek and, something's, watching them from behind the trees, sort of.
I love your illustrations in the book. I really do.
Thank you. Thank you.
And yeah, that encounter, because at first when I first read it, I was thinking, oh, I wonder if Lynn's going over there, and then the second that the Bigfoot sees a more adult looking, oh, now it's a larger human. I was waiting for it to like take off, but it didn't. It seemed to just want to hang out there for most of the rest of the night.
Very curious. Yeah, it seemed very curious. She said it was kind of like rocking back and forth, watching, like kind of pursing its lips, which, sounds very similar to, I don't suppose you were at the town meeting for finding Bigfoot when they came to Maine.
Not from Maine,
but
no.
There was a really wonderful little account from a woman who at night had been inadvertently wound up at the scene of a house fire where, because she was carpooling with somebody who was a volunteer fire person. So they had to stop and check and make sure everything was okay. And while she was kind of standing off in the background, waiting for, her friend to talk to the fire chief and talk to the parson or whoever's house was burning, she looked over to the side and there was like kind of an old, like a tall tree stump. And next to it was a very similar figure doing very similar behavior, just kind of watching and, watching all the activity and watching what was going on with the fire and then eventually disappearing into the woods. So it's like, clearly there's a curiosity there, a wonderment that kind of, at least momentarily, divests them of the normally very cautious behavior of like staying concealed, and also a certain level of, like this was another very small community with heavy wooded areas surrounding everything, and so there's obviously a certain comfort level of just being within the tree line or adjacent to it and knowing you can just kind of disappear whenever you want. So it's interesting to have heard her stories, then hear other stories, and then there's a little pattern of this just kind of watching, wondering what's going on, and then just eventually disappearing into the woods when you're done with once your curiosity has been, absorbed by what's going on.
Yeah, once you're done creeping. Yeah, because they're just such creepers sometimes. Which is better than the other opposite end of that is them just always acting like the classic. Now we're talking dog man, which is they're always in a bad mood and they don't mind getting in your face per se. But
very aggressive, territorial. Yeah.
So that's better.
Yeah, I much prefer the curious ones.
Yeah, that's much nicer because you got the kids playing hide and seek, which I think they would be very interested in. And then a house fire would, of course, be of interest. We're looky-loos with stuff like that, fires and accidents, and I would imagine they would be too. So, that was a cool sighting with a great illustration to go along with it. So next up, we have Stephen Lombardo Jr.
Yes. Yeah, that was an account that I really, to this day, I still puzzle over that one. And I think it's one of my favorites in the book for that reason, because there are so many unanswered questions. Steve was working at MBNA, which was a credit card processing place that set up some really big offices in Maine and put a lot of money into the state at a certain point in the 90s. And they had started shifting staff from a downtown location to a a different location further up the coast. So to do that, they were allowing employees to park at the downtown location and then take a shuttle bus, which they ran constantly for the employees' convenience as the shifts came on and off, to get you to the location initially at the beginning of the day and then back to your car at the end of the day. So you didn't have to, the commute was, it's like taking the subway. You can just sit there and read, do a chat with your friends, your coworkers, whatever. You didn't have to take responsibility for the driving, which must have been nice at the end of a long day. So he was on a bus, not a huge bus, just one of those little shuttle buses. And they were headed down Route 1, which is, fairly dark. It has some light posts, but not an excessive amount of them. It's not a super wooded area because there are little cutbacks along the way where there are like small houses or small businesses, but they all back onto a big wilderness preserve. So there's a massive greenway just off the main road, which runs up the coast. And so they were coming down through Northport, and in a fairly empty stretch, I think there's like a little house a little further down, and where they were, there was like a field cut in, which now I think has a small business building on it, in the modern, like however many, 20, I don't know how many years later. Ooh, time to get squashy. But so it was a clear cut area, not a lot of obstructions. And as they were coming around this bend, they noticed there was a row of all these essentially unmarked utility vehicles, pulled up, alongside where the ditch, there's like a drainage ditch that runs along the roadside there. And they were run bumper to bumper to bumper in this whole stretch. And not only that, they also had work lights projecting into the field beyond them, which is not a common thing to see in that era. Maine nowadays, there's a lot of nighttime construction that goes on now, especially as summers have gotten hotter. But in that era, seeing work lights at night was not a common thing. So it really stood out. But the other thing is it didn't appear to be a construction site. There were unmarked work vehicles, but no like construction vehicles. So, and they're all parked in a row, then the ditch, and the lights shining into the field beyond the ditch. So they slowed down because, obstruction in the road. And the bus driver was kind of looking out, and Steve was looking out, and then they saw something. In this, where the vehicles were parked bumper to bumper with the ditch below them, there was what appeared to be clearly visible to them, a fur-covered foot sticking out of the ditch, as though something had been hit and was lying in the ditch with their appendage visible up over the edge of it where they had fallen. And because it was backlit by the work light reflecting off the field, they could see like the hair on it looked kind of wispy and reddish brown, and that the foot was bare. Like it wasn't like a foot that had, had a sock on it or had come out of a sneaker. So where originally they thought maybe, okay, it's not construction. Maybe it's, somebody ran into a deer or something, because there's a lot of deer in the area. And then they saw that foot and they knew it was not deer. But they had to keep going. They couldn't stop and pull over and go investigate because, A, the shuttle bus had a schedule. B, there was traffic coming behind them that also needed to get through because it's not a multi-lane road. It's just two directions. And so they kept going, puzzling over it. The bus driver, she had originally come from Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania, as we now know, has a long history of Bigfoot activity. And she said, well, I wonder if that's what it was. Because it didn't look like a human, like it looked humanoid, but not like a modern human foot. So they, Steve got in his car. Once they got back to the lot, he went home. He looked in the newspapers the next day to see if there were any articles. Nothing, not a word. Ran into the shuttle bus driver, back at work again, like a day or two later, and asked her. I was like, because she was doing a loop. She was coming back by that location from the other direction, coming back up within, I think it was like a half hour or so from the original trip by where they spotted this. And, he asked her, he's like, could you see anything else on your way back by? And she told him that it was empty. Everything was gone. All the vehicles were gone. There was no trace of anything when she drove back by on her loop back up, which seemed also very strange for that amount of commotion in the middle of nowhere on Route 1 in Maine to just suddenly vanish. So, Steve went back. He looked at the roadway just to see if he could see traces of anything, a tuft of hair, some blood, maybe first aid remnants, who knows, tire tracks. And all he found was that it appeared that all of the debris on the road, like the normal nitty gritty road stuff, the road dirt, stuff blowing in off the fields and stuff like that, was gone. It was like somebody had power washed that stretch of the road so that there was nothing left on it. So he thought that was very strange too. And so he kept checking the papers, found nothing about it, thought maybe it was a film crew, looked it up, couldn't find any other productions or anything like that filming at the time. And since then I've checked with, friends who are filmmakers who might have been doing some guerrilla filmmaking that might not have been on the books. And nobody knows anything about anything like that was going on there. And nothing else has ever appeared. So that's where we're left. We don't know what happened. We just know what they saw and that it disappeared almost immediately afterwards in an inordinately short amount of time. I have a friend who got really obsessed with this for a while and was trying to figure out if it was something, if there were unmarked government vehicles, if there was local Fed offices who would have been called, how long would it have taken them to get there and then depart. And it turns out, there would be some doable stuff because, the FBI, et cetera, they have base offices in Maine in different places in some of the larger cities that are not that far away from where this occurred. So it could have been done, might have involved helicopters. The speculation can run wild because it doesn't make any sense as it stands.
Yeah.
And so to this day, Steve is just perplexed and would still love to know what the heck he saw, because it's, decades later, it's still, when he talks about it, he's reliving it and seeing it in his head, and that frozen moment in time where they realized that it was a foot sticking out of the ditch backlit by those lights. He can't erase that. That's going to be with him forever. So
I'm sure it would be difficult to tell, especially at night and all the lights going on and everything. But did they say it was a big foot, size wise, that it was just naturally large as well?
No, he did not say that it was, out of scale. He thought it was fairly commensurate to existing human scale. But I think he's also aware that scale and vision are very difficult too.
Right.
And he, one of the things I liked about Steve is that he was not prone to exaggeration. He did not try to extrapolate himself. He did not try to exaggerate what he saw. And I think one of the things that really got me was the way he registered the poignancy of it. Because whatever it was not alive. It had been living its life, doing its thing, and something had happened. Probably a car had hit it or something like that from the appearance of it. And so I think that is one of the reasons why that moment of seeing what was there, it just ingrained in him, is because it carried with it some pretty heavy significance. And, generated in him, I think, a sense of, respect and responsibility to understand what he saw, because clearly something had come to an end there. But yeah, he did not say that it was an oversized foot. We talked a little bit about what the skin tone looked like, and he said it looked like a dirty, like the skin was dirty. So he did say that, but it was not like an average, it wasn't like, a modern human foot that had spent all its life in socks and shoes. Yeah. It was something different.
Yeah. So. Besides the fur, the reddish brown fur.
Well, right.
Like you said, it's like,
yes.
Even if they didn't see that, it's who would be walking around barefoot on the side of the road in Maine, right?
Yeah.
Like that's not
and it was like November, so it's like it's not.
Nope.
Yeah, no thanks.
You know what? This is something
because the ocean is right there. Like, see, it's not a sheltered area,
right?
It's wide open to the elements.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, no, that wouldn't not impossible, but you had the fur in, then it just kind of sweeps that right out of the window. But this is something that I've always postulated. I'm going, why hasn't a Bigfoot screwed it up for the rest of the species? Of course we have heard of stories of them being hit, and then the government swoops in, and gosh, that sounds a little like this story, doesn't it? But the fact that it wasn't this, it looked like a size 18 shoe, and I've never even seen a foot that big. It wasn't anything right out of the gate like that makes me think, well, gosh, well, maybe my theory does sometimes happen to where they do screw up and they do get hit by cars. They do get too close to the road. And then the fact that they noticed that these were unmarked construction of vehicles, right? And you go, well, gosh, I mean, it sure sounds like there was a cleanup there. Then you have power washing going on, not even any grit on the road. So very strange. Yeah, that one is. Yeah, my eyebrows were like, woo, going up through the ceiling on that one, because I'm like, wow, that's an interesting one.
Yeah, the night I talked to him, I actually had to go over to one of my friends' houses afterwards and just be like, "Bah!" like what?
Yeah,
like to try to process it, because in the moment when you're interviewing, you're trying to just absorb everything and listen. And, ask questions that kind of catch things that may have slipped through the cracks for details, and to kind of pull out what, the layers of what, went through their mind at the moment was. But so you kind of have to like keep your own reactions compartmentalized. Mm-hmm. And like they had, that was one where it was like, I had to come out somewhere.
Yeah, I would be the same way.
Like, call my friend. I'm like, what you doing? Can I come over?
Yeah, you got some time?
Just had to, just had to dump, because I'm like, what? And there's no resolution. There's nothing. It's just an open-ended big question mark on that one. So,
did he say that there was a quote unquote regular vehicle still at the scene, like possibly the vehicle that hit said whatever it was, or it was just strictly what looked like construction vehicles?
He said they all looked like, work or utility vehicles. Yeah. He didn't notice if there was like a sedan or something like that. He thought they were all larger vehicles, like all trucks. But that said, in Maine, there are a lot of, there's a lot of self-employed people. There's a lot of carpenters. There's a lot of contractors. There's a lot of workmen who prefer to drive pickup trucks, especially with the 4-wheel drive, for, doing logging roads and stuff like that. So, one of those vehicles could conceivably have been the one that hit it, because also the larger vehicles would actually, cause a fatality in that case, whereas some of the smaller vehicles might have just winged whatever it was.
Yeah. It's either that or we go full conspiracy where they, it was a regular person just on their way without even if they were in a truck or not, but they hit it, they're still there, but then somehow the others find out, which is always like, how do they always find out so quickly? But then they swoop in and tell them to go. Nothing. Nope.
Yeah.
You hit a bear. Goodbye. Like, you
Yeah.
know, we've
Yeah.
heard stories like that.
Or
before,
they tow their vehicle.
Yeah.
And, you know, probably clean it. And, you know, if we want to go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, that's a deep one. That's for sure.
It's a deep one.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's yeah, so many questions.
That's a good one. That's a fascinating one. All right. Last but not least, we are going to talk about Kathy's experiences.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. This is, yeah, again, very appropriate because Kathy's encounter also happened in Berwick, where Lynn Colette's experience happened. And Kathy's experience was, you know, purely visual, especially in the sense that she was in a vehicle at the time she saw what she saw. But the fact remains that it was, let's see, 30, like, I think around 30 or 40 years after when Lynn Colette had her experience, but less than 3 miles away from where Lynn had her experience. So Kathy was not super excited to talk about her experience. She talked to me once, and then I managed to ask her some follow-up questions later, but she made it pretty clear that speaking about it still made her deeply uncomfortable, and it wasn't something she wanted to keep dredging up. But it was her. I talked to her daughter first, and then after several months, I finally got to talk to Kathy herself. But she had been staying with her husband at her daughter's camp in Berwick, which is, there's like a little network of dirt roads that kind of run off one of the main roads. And there's all these little private lots that go off of them with little, you know, even smaller dirt roads, or even grass roads at that point, that go to these little campsites, which are all just kind of buried in the woods, surrounded by little boggy areas. And then the river that runs right through that particular area. And so they were coming out of her daughter's camp. It was very early in the morning because they'd stayed there just to have a nice woodsy retreat for an evening. And they came out, pulled across the bridge, which is not a super high bridge. It's not like a itty bitty camp bridge. It's got a pretty solid base, like it's a built, engineered bridge. But it's not that far up off the banks that come down next to it. So you can see them pretty clearly from the roadway. There isn't a lot in the way because there's not much traffic there. And as she looked out of the window, she saw something alongside the water, kind of getting up from a stoop. And it was not a human, and it was covered in fur, and it noticed they were there and then went on its way. But that was enough to just totally freak her out, to the point where she did not even say anything to her husband who was driving, because she did not want him to stop. She wanted him to keep going, not try to turn around and find out because she had a feeling that if she said something, he would be like, oh, well, we gotta go look, and she was like, no, we're just didn't say anything until much later about what she had seen. And it's a very interesting area. I couldn't do a lot of exploring in the woods around where Lynn had her experience, because there are more houses there now than there used to be. But I was able to kind of, in between all like the no trespassing signs for people's posted property, which we try to be careful of. I was able, because the bridge is just, a common area, I was able to kind of go down on the banks there, and it's, it's got this amazing rich red sandy, I don't know, I guess, banks. Yeah. Really rich red sandy banks, the kind of stuff that, if people know blueberries and stuff, blueberry bushes and stuff like that. That kind of stuff they love to grow in because it has really good drainage, like all the water, like there's lots of water, but it drains really easily through it. So it was that kind of bank. So I think that, it would be great to, if I was closer to Berwick, you can bet I would have been there looking for footprints a lot, because it's like kind of the perfect material to receive footprints. Lots of woods, like banking right up to the water, except for right around the bridge there, where she saw the creature. And it's very close to Route 1 and like a lot of civilization and tourism and all that stuff. But it's like a whole other world. There's like sand pits and big expanses of bog and blueberry barrens, and it's just surprisingly undeveloped, just off the main drag of Route 1. So it's in a section of Maine that butts right up against New Hampshire. Like if you walked 5-10 minutes, you could actually walk into New Hampshire. You could follow Witch Trot Road, and which is another one of my favorite things in the area, is like, that's where Witch Trot Road is. So it's a very interesting place. If you see the photo that's in my book of the boggy area there, it has a very spooky feel to it. But it's obviously very rich in resources, tons of animals, tons of undergrowth, including fruit bearing undergrowth. And, I think directly behind all of that, then you get into the rural areas where there are food crops and stuff like that being grown. So there's ample resources in that area, which is something I always look at, because it's like, you can't have life without the resources to support it. And that area clearly had plenty. So
that sounds like the setting for The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon, when you mentioned like the bogs and things. I'm just mentioning, I'm imagining just a lot of water, and she's up on the hummocks and she's eating fiddleheads, and then there's Bigfoot. But see, now Kathy, I do understand this because of just the dichotomy of and the vast expanse of people's experiences with Bigfoot. Like, to me, when I first read it, I go, gosh, to me though, but this is because I'm obsessed with Bigfoot and I've been talking about him for so long. Him, like he's one guy, the species, the creature. But to me, that would be almost like an ideal sighting, right? Like you're behind metal and glass, so you're not like that babysitter who's just walking up and is seemingly just like you could be grabbed by one if it so wanted. Yeah,
and you have to herd the vulnerable kids inside, like they're safe.
And they're like, why do we have to go in? You're crazy, lady. We're having fun, So to me, Kathy's is so ideal, but to Kathy, it's not ideal at all. And a lot of times people, they don't want to be alone in this, but they also don't really want to talk about it. And it's just, it's this, and you can imagine how many times has she had nightmares about it, or how many times now she has a fear of bridges or something, like these few seconds in somebody's life that's, you're like, oh, I'm sure some people out there are like, oh, what a, that's a kind of a boring encounter. Like there's no screaming and running but it's not though. When you really think about it, it's not. And it changed her life. Like it traumatized her.
Yeah. And it's paradigm shifting, because it's like, here's somebody who's led, their average everyday life and been an average everyday person doing average everyday things. And then suddenly out of nowhere in this surreally pastoral scene, there's this thing that just disrupts everything they understood about the world.
Something that is supposed to be just this funny made up thing. Oh, Bigfoot, ha ha ha. And I'm not saying that anyone's going to think that this particular encounter is boring. I'm just saying in the past people love to comment about everything. And so they just want where are all the bangers at? Like all the sweatiest Bigfoot stories you can find of people just needing brown pants, and it's not always like that. No. And it doesn't need that. They are out there. I
have talked to a few.
Yes, you have. And it's not always that's not always needed for something that's really impactful and really life changing for somebody. So
Yeah.
that's cool that Kathy was at least talked to you a couple of times to get the
Yeah, I
details
was
hammered
very
out.
thankful. And hopefully that helped her kind of get it a little bit more out of her system too, where she kind of,
Yes.
because, one hopes that you eventually kind of come to some sort of peace with what you've seen and are able to kind of include it in your life experience in a way that doesn't feel destructive,
Yeah.
like that's the hope.
Oh, yeah. At the end of the day,
So,
folks just don't want to be alone in their experience. They're like,
yeah.
am I the only one? And they start drilling down on this stuff, and they find out, oh heck no, you're not
Yeah.
alone at
Yeah,
all.
no, you're not. And I think that's like, I've talked to, so many people, both fans and people who are colleagues of, the Finding Bigfoot crew. And it's like, we all love to riff on that show, but guess what? It cracked that ice. Like it made it so that people could speak with other people about their experiences in an environment where they weren't going to be made fun of, and then in turn gave all the audience members a context to talk to, their friends, their relatives, and discover the people that were willing to listen to them,
Yeah.
because now the conversation had been normalized somewhat. So it's like, we do all love to dish on Finding Bigfoot, but it served an amazing purpose,
It did.
sociologically, and it broke the ice on that.
It did.
So
It did. And let's face it, some of those guys they're so into Bigfoot. They live and breathe it.
yeah,
They're good. They're
yes,
good people beyond that.
they're
So yeah.
genuinely interested in it.
Yeah.
Like they were, yeah. So there's some good folks in that crowd.
Well, Michelle, it's been a pleasure to finally speak with you. And I do hope that I heard you kind of drop a little hint that maybe Bigfoot in Maine Part 2 might be in the works, huh?
It is, yeah. I've been working
Excellent.
on it basically since I sent in my final draft of the first one. I started doing more interviews. So, um, yeah, things, life gets disrupted frequently. I've had the last, yeah. Anyways, we won't get into that. But meanwhile, things are things are percolating along. And, as I found with my first book, I always swore that I would never take as long with my next one. But I find that, what? Giving things time to percolate means sometimes stuff comes to you that you wouldn't have had otherwise. So, with Bigfoot in Maine, it took me, like over a decade. But by the end of the process, I had actually managed to make contact with people that I thought I was never going to be able to track down.
Yes.
And with volume 2, what's been happening is I'm getting uncanny amounts of accounts that correspond to each other, location wise.
Yeah.
That I wasn't expecting at all. So, yeah. So I'm just kind of letting it do what it needs to do, and I'm going to just keep working on it, and then suddenly it will be done, and I'll be like, oh, there we go.
How'd that happen? Like, I blacked out. What happened? It's done. Yeah, and the great thing about that is too, and certain areas of the country seem to be a little bit more. They lean more towards being more tight-lipped. Obviously, I couldn't spit that out. But you'll find that I'm sure, especially since it might be a good thing to take the time on the book, and life just is making you do that, because you talk to this gentleman, and then over the last couple years he said, oh yeah, I talked to Michelle and she's blah, 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 about Bigfoot, and the guy's like, well, I have a Bigfoot story, so that stuff tends to flesh out just naturally. So that probably is just meant to be.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I'm just trying to go along with the ride, put my feet on the road and see what happens.
Yeah.
So,
well, Michelle, before I let you go, let everybody know where to find you and the books.
Oh, sure. The easiest place to find us is at greenhandbookshop.com. Obviously, I can personalize and sign copies for you if you're buying through my own bookshop, or you can walk in 661 Congress Street in Portland, Maine, to the shop there. But other than that, it's available everywhere. It's available on the History Press site. It's available on Amazon. It's available through a ton of different bookstores and random places like Sam's Club and CVS here in Maine.
That's
So
great.
it's out and about out there. So
That
thank
is
you
great.
so much.
Well, thank you, Michelle. It's been my pleasure.